Born in Germany, Miss Lauren Hugh was brought into one of the most infamous cults that spanned the world, the Children of God. After fleeing the cult and looking for a life of her own, Miss Lauren Hugh was an airman in the United States Air Force, a cable guy, and a bouncer at a gay club. In 2021, after long work on a book of essays, Miss Lauren Hugh debuted with her novel, Leaving Isn't the Hardest Thing to Do. Little did she know that after everything she'd been through, and all the uphill struggles she'd faced as a white woman, she would now have to face her greatest obstacle yet. Book Twitter. As Lindsay Ellis once said, mask off. Now, for any of you on book Twitter or white liberal Twitter, you may already be acquainted with the current topic of this video, in which case, this intro is gonna feel pretty redundant to you. But on April 13th, 2021, the morning that her debut was due to drop, Miss Lauren Hugh decided to go ahead and take to Twitter, specifically tweeting about some reviews that she'd read. Poorly worded or not, the tweet came off incredibly condescending and woefully obtuse. This year launched a whole event on book Twitter, and a week later, we're still talking about it. I'll admit, I had absolutely no plans on making this video. After Mina had already made her video about Miss Lauren Hugh, I kind of figured that the subject was over. I was like, at this point, we've talked it all out. Mina was very succinct and said exactly pretty much what I was kind of thinking. So I kind of thought that's just where things were going to end. Yet here we are, again, nearly a week later, still talking about this event. I will say that this conversation was kind of, for the most part, pretty dead at this point. It had gone quiet, not many people were tweeting about it, and Lauren Hugh, the author herself, is pretty much what revived this entire discourse and this entire conversation. And what can I say? Hey, it brought you here to this video, you know? And who am I to not comment on drama that I am apparently now a part of? Maybe Chanel snapped when she said I should probably just, remain like a pretty man and stay silent. So, let's talk about the tweets. On April 13th, Miss Hugh took to Twitter to talk about a review that she had read. Here's what she had to say.
I went over to Goodreads because I'm an unhealthy person who checks these things. But all I saw was this review by @and_read, and now I'm crying again. Thank you, Andrea. Truly. Goddamn.
Now, there is a conversation to be had about whether or not authors should enter the spaces of reviewers as well as consumers who look to reviews, especially since reviews aren't for the author. But at this point in time, Miss Lauren Hugh took to Twitter to talk about a review that really touched her and made her cry. So at this point, it's okay, yeah, NBD, that's good. I'm glad that you were touched by a review, and I'm glad that reviewer was touched by your book, because hey, that's good, isn't it? And after all she's been through in her life, I kinda get it. Again, Lauren Hugh was born into a cult. And while yes, she escaped, I have listened to things about the Children of God cults. I can't even imagine what she has been through, not only as a person born into that cult, but as a woman and as a queer woman, even if she is still a white woman at the end of the day. But then, Miss Lauren Hugh decided to keep tweeting about reviews.
Glad to see most of the Goodreads assholes still giving 4-star reviews to show they're super tough reviewers who need to, fall in love, Anyway, no one likes you.
And then, after seeing 2 reviewers who gave her book 4.5 ratings, this is what she had to say.
I just finished this too. 4.5, rounding up, working on review. Yes, such a good book. I also gave it a 4.5, but rounding down.
Grow up.
Now look, I'm a writer and I'm a book reviewer myself. I've also listened to enough episodes of Ride or Die, please subscribe wherever you take in all your favorite podcasts, to know that reviews really aren't meant for authors, especially Goodreads. I mean, have you seen that site? It still functions like it's in 2006. Is that site really for anyone at the end of the day? Subscribe to Storygraph. Storygraph is fantastic. In the same way that Amazon reviews and Grubhub reviews are meant for consumers, so are book reviews. And as someone who no longer does star ratings, I will say that there were times where I gave a book like a 3.25 or a 4.25, and I would usually round down at that point because obviously, you know, with math and everything, like if you were doing math and it was 4.49 and it was like round the number, you would round it down to a 4. But if it was like 4.5 and above, usually in math you'd round it up. With all that being said, and my personal old rating system that I used to use, if I saw someone else rate a book 4.5 and they round it down to a 4, that would just make me go, huh, that's not really how I do it, but, I mean, to each their own. Because again, a reviewer space is partially for other reviewers, but mostly for consumers. There have been times where I've rated books 4.25 and I've given them the full 5-star rating because I enjoyed them that much, but I just didn't think that the writing was quite up there. I can name several books like that. If I was still rating books, I honestly think the last selection book, and I mean like the last one, the one with like Josie and everyone and Evelyn, that one might have gotten a 5-star from me because I really liked that book. I found it wildly entertaining. But I wouldn't get upset, even as an author seeing someone round my book down. Because at the end of the day, my life doesn't exist on the internet, contrary to popular belief. But in Miss Lauren Hugh's case, it's just clear that she was mad that she didn't get a full 5-star rating. It didn't matter how favorable the review was, how the person felt about the book. Miss Lauren Hugh was just mad that she didn't get the 5-star rating. And I think we can all agree that it's kind of a case of entitlement, isn't it? Now, when I started seeing this go around on my timeline, I didn't really think much of it, and then I continued seeing it, and I was like, wow, this is one of the dumbest things that I've ever seen on book Twitter. And that includes the Halsey versus Maggie Steve Otter beef. Honestly, though, it was kind of a welcome change of pace. For once, book Twitter wasn't talking about consumerism, or piracy, or performative activism, or you're my sister, my blood. I should want to protect you. But instead, it was just a bunch of reviewers pointing out this really dumb tweet and just having fun with it. Like, and I mean, this kind of took me back to like some of the like really dumb shit that we took on book Twitter. I have been on Twitter for like fucking years. I fucking remember the Lanny Serum shit. Like, I remember Handbook for Mortals. For those of y'all who don't, just Google it or look up a video. So I'm not going into that today. But, like, that's kind of the shit I was getting here. I was like, finally, like, book Twitter is united on a conversation. Like, we can all agree on something for once. Because here's the thing about Twitter. It doesn't matter the size of your profile. You could have 1 follower. You could have 1 million. When you tweet, unless you're on private, people are gonna see that tweet. Like, even people who don't follow you, no matter how small your account, or how big, they're gonna see that tweet. And if you tweet something dumb, people are gonna comment on it. It's the same as if you threw movie reviewers, or food reviewers, or Mr. Diet Nazi himself, PewDiePie, under the bus. It's gonna garner attention, and people are gonna have opinions. Now, honestly, I thought that this would be where things kind of end. Like, I honestly thought that this would be the end of the discussion. And at the point in recording, apparently, I'm right around like 14 minutes, which is kind of what everyone was kind of talking about when they talked about this discussion earlier in the week. Like, it was just a short, succinct thing. Like, it was just like, man, can you believe these dumb tweets? And also the fact that everyone's getting blocked who has just like an inkling of like a contrasting opinion. I got blocked because I sent a GIF that said, Kim, there's people dying. Even authors, when they are pulled into book Twitter drama and they are not part of book Twitter, and you'd be surprised with how many authors aren't part of book Twitter. Like, not every author is on book Twitter, but there are authors on book Twitter. You know, it's like the square and the rectangle. When anyone who isn't part of book Twitter is brought into book Twitter drama, usually they will just ignore it. They'll just be like, okay, whatever. Or then they'll issue like a thing and they'll be like, oh, yeah, I guess I tweeted something dumb. Guess that was the thing. And that'll usually be the end of it. The only time that book Twitter drama goes on is when it involves other people on book Twitter. Spoiler alert for the rest of this video. Miss Lauren Hugh, she just keeps going. I'm pretty sure she's still tweeting at this moment. One of my friends was like, you're gonna have more stuff to film after this. And I was like, nah, I'm filming what I need to film, and then I'm just putting this out in my mind. Like, I do not need to occupy my mind anymore with white women. Unless, of course, Brie Larson is watching, in which case, hey, how you doing? You, want my email number? I mean, do you want, like, my contact? Miss Lauren Hugh, several hours after the original tweets, on her debut day, when she probably should have just been celebrating her debut, had the following to say.
The book bloggers found this and are taking it very seriously, because as everyone knows, every stoned-ass 3 a.m. tweet is extremely serious and must be taken seriously.
Now here's the thing. I grew up with parents who smoked weed. Like, I know what weed does to you. Like, when we were in school and we were doing the drug-free day and getting education, like, obviously in elementary you shouldn't be smoking weed. I was very much aware of the effects of smoking weed and the dangers of smoking cigarettes because my parents did both of them. One of them is a natural thing from the earth, and then the other one is something that kills you. And let me just say that my parents, when they got high, like, they were fun. Like, my mom was regularly fun. My dad, like, had his moments. But when they both, like, had weed in their system, they were like a hoot and a half. They were just, like, a nice, relaxed, chill version of themselves. We'd be watching a movie. Sometimes someone would have something funny to say. Like, honestly, like, from my experience, weed just makes you more of who you are. Like, it just kind of makes you voice maybe not whatever's on your mind, but you're very relaxed and calm to just say whatever you're feeling. It's not like it's something that warps your mind and makes you think, oh, I'm gonna say this when I really don't mean it. So the idea that the weed somehow affected Miss Lauren Hugh into saying what she did and her blaming it on that, being like, oh, it was just a dumb tweet from being high at 3 a.m. Like, what can you expect? Even though, before and after this tweet, she has defended her stance. So when she initially said that, oh, it was just the weed, she was clearly lying. Because she's gone on to defend it since and just retcon that from the narrative. It's honestly kind of hilarious. Because, actually, no, that's not the truth, Ellen. Weed and alcohol, in my opinion, just make you more of who you are. Whenever I drink, because I've never really smoked, I've never had a desire to smoke weed, I've only drank, it just makes me sluttier. That's about it. I'm very much myself when I'm drunk, but it just makes me sluttier. If I see someone hot, I'm gonna be like, oh, I'm gonna overcome my anxiety and flirt with you. Hey, how you doing today, sheriff? Maybe not sheriff because ACAB, but you get what I mean. Plus, also, weed just has like a smell to it, and as someone who, again, grew up with parents who smoked weed, I am very familiar with the smell of weed and how people at school can smell it on you. And everyone would ask me, hey, you do pot, don't you? And I'd be like, no, just because my eyes were very stoner looking and my clothes smelled like weed, no, I don't smoke. Like, I don't. So at this point, book Twitter is going wild, okay? Like, people are just going in the replies and talking about how, like, Lauren, this is, like, really dumb, and this is also, like, really hypocritical, and nothing's adding up here. People are also 1-star reviewing the book, and, you know, whether or not you agree with that, people are doing that, because at this point, Miss Lauren Hugh has insulted reviewers multiple times, as well as their intelligence at this point, so I can't blame people for going and 1-starring the book after this, because this is, like, some real big baby behavior. It's to the point to where even a popular book reviewer who only ever seems to get involved in drama when it involves another person of color that they can drag, also was like, I'm never reading this book. And that even caught me by surprise. Now, this is a conversation that many people have talked to death. If you've been on Book Twitter or BookTube or any of the book socials, you've heard this conversation and you're probably over it at this point. But for the context of this video, we have to discuss it again. If you're new to Book Twitter or you stumbled upon this video and you had no idea about any of this stuff beforehand, as well as the complicated relationship there seems to be between book reviewers, Goodreads, and authors, Well, do I have a story for you. As I mentioned earlier, book reviews exist for one purpose really only. Consumers. Like, yeah, book reviews also exist for other reviewers, but at the end of the day, book reviews exist purely for consumers. Like, that is why majority of people look at book reviews. Yes, people on book socials also watch book reviews and stuff like that, but it's usually because they're like, do I want to buy this book? Which makes them a consumer. Or they'll be like, oh, let me support my friend. But either way, majority of people who look at reviews or watch reviews or read reviews are doing it because they want to know if something that they are going to purchase is going to be worth it, or something they're going to get from the library is even worth opening. Again, books, much like anything else that you can purchase, are consumable goods. Just because it is a form of art, it is a narrative media, does not make it different from buying a Snickers at the store. That being said, some authors are not a fan of reviews. This can range from whether or not they are critiquing a review or straight up just attacking a reviewer. And I do want to specify that those are two different things. Now, say if a reviewer posts something like, F you, you disgusting, derogatory C word, then yeah, that is something that needs to be addressed. That is something that we need to be like, that's not a valid review. You are just being a dick, and you also used a slur there, so, fuck you. Or, say, if someone questions the validity of the rep in your book, such as what happened with Arvin and Madi last year with How It All Blew Up. Someone called into question the rep in the book, despite the fact that the rep in the book is literally Arvin and Madi's identity, saying that it was bad rep and not faithful and offensive. The identity of the person who wrote the book. Which, if you don't know, How It All Blew Up is loosely based on a true story that happened to the author. So if a reviewer is trying to negate your experience and your identity, yeah, you probably should call that out. Like, that is something to call out in good faith. But attacking reviewers just because they didn't review the book the way that you wanted them to? Now granted, at least Lauren Hugh is not like fucking Kathleen Hale, who straight up stalked a reviewer and then after that somehow got a book deal for stalking a reviewer and got to sell that. A story about her stalking a reviewer. Anybody want to guess what race Kathleen Hale was? But Miss Lauren Hugh is still dragging a person who adored her book. They liked her book. They connected with it. They resonated with it. And you're dragging them because it's not a perfect score, because you think that they're just being a harsh/critical reviewer just to be one? I hope this doesn't ignite another review discussion in the community where we talk about if giving books 4 and 5 stars makes the ratings less valuable because blah 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 blah, and critical reading. Look y'all, again, I'm a writer. I get how it feels to bare your heart and soul into something that you have worked on, especially if you've worked on it for a prolonged amount of time, and then once you put it out and someone else consumes it, if they have a different view than what you did, especially if it's negative, I get it. Like, I get how that can feel. Even if it's something where it's like, oh, I liked this, but I wasn't in love with it. Like, again, I get it because you bared your heart and soul to it. But that's the thing about illicit affairs. It's no longer about how you read the book or what you meant the book to be. Once you put out anything, whether it be narrative media or food that you made, or, you know, like a really weird, crappy paper mache thing that you made to try and create this bond of friendship between you and your friends who you're still, you know, besties with, so hey, maybe that paper mache thing worked. Once it leaves you and goes out into the world to be consumed by other people, it's no longer about what you think of it. It's about what the consumer thinks of it. Do I want to see my book get less than 5-star ratings? Of course not. Am I prepared for Chanel to drag my book because of the fact that it is a fantasy with a slow burn romance that takes place over the course of 5 books? Yeah, I am prepared for that. She's already told me. Because no matter how well written or not well written a book is, people are gonna have contrasting opinions. I think that Twilight is one of the worst books I have ever had to actually read. but other people really love it, and I've seen some people defend the writing. Again, everyone has a differing opinion. This call to action for reviewers to review your book in a very specific way, and only the way that you want it, is honestly really disingenuous and also insulting. And I get it, like, getting your book review bombed on Goodreads and other social platforms can definitely hurt, and that can definitely mess you up. But you literally tweeted about how dumb a book reviewer was, because they gave your book a 4.5 and rounded it down to a 4, which was still a favorable rating, and they liked your book a lot. What did you think was gonna happen? Actions have consequences. And I will say, like, I get that, because I am someone who, both because of my shit posts that I've made in the past, as well as callouts, I am prepared for certain people to eventually, when my book is announced, or even when it drops, to go out of their way to trash it, or to potentially derail conversations about it, because I have burned some bridges. That's just how the internet is. So this is something we obviously have to talk about. Whenever anything is happening on Twitter, it does not matter what side of Twitter, once something gets enough attention, you have someone who goes, you know what I should do? Make death threats. Because that's fun, and I can do it under the guise of book Twitter, so that way I can get away with it because I look like I'm part of the community. I mean, hey, they're clearly one step away from doing it themselves, aren't they? And I'm not going to say that book Twitter is free of people like that, because it isn't. A while back, and I haven't like super opened up about this, but I've talked about it in a few other videos, I had a stalker, and the stalker found me because of book Twitter. That is how the whole thing started. So obviously book Twitter is not free of its fucked up people. Obviously. But at the same time, whenever someone is getting dragged or getting called out, and they are someone who is a part of liberal Twitter, or they're just, they're like the anti-conservative Twitter, the diet Nazis come out and they're like, oh shit, look, they're tearing up one of their own. Why don't we jump in and say some really fucked up shit? But something that was just originally clowning on Lauren Hugh, who at this point in time was still, going off for several tweets and even going down to calling people nerds, like saying all this different stuff, where she was really doubling down and just calling people nerds. Like, this is some of the shit that she said.
All the writers scared to even like that tweet. I see you. I will hate them out loud for you. Fucking nerds on a power trip. You forgot to assign homework, motherfuckers. Yeah, you really wouldn't want to be stuck sitting by one of these nerds on a plane. I love how proud y'all are of this relationship that basically equates to shut up and take it. Don't make eye contact and we won't hurt you, because we love books.
Or saying, wow, I can't believe y'all proved me right. Because of one death threat, and then eventually two, pretty much now changed the whole thing. Because once Lauren had that, she was now able to shift the narrative. Now, whether or not those death threats were from people who were just playing around or actually meant it, because there are assholes on the internet who will send you death threats even though they don't mean it, because, oh, funny, it's a joke. As someone who has received a few of them myself, I would know. You can't block all of us. We'll just keep coming. Stick your head in the oven and maybe it'll stop. It won't. No one will read your piece of shit book now. We decide if you live or die on book Twitter, bitch. We decided. Bye. In this oven, my twin brother from another mother. This now allowed Lauren to shift the narrative and change it, because death threats, no matter if they are fake or not, can be serious shit, especially since people on the internet, if they want to, can find out shit about you. The fact of the matter is, these things are always going to happen. I've had tweets that have gone viral in certain spaces, not like main Twitter viral, but enough to where they've garnered attention, and I've had slurs thrown my way or threats. Yay. And I will say this. No matter how dumb this Lauren Hugh conversation is, and how dumb the tweets are, and this entire circus that's going on, that is not grounds to send someone a death threat. When there are actual killers and rapists and diet Nazis around, Sending a death threat to someone who just made a dumb tweet about reviewers on Twitter is utterly disgusting. And I cannot believe, or maybe I just don't want to believe, that someone on book Twitter was dumb enough to do that, whether or not they meant it. And if they didn't mean it, what the fuck is wrong with you? And if you did mean it, what the fuck is wrong with you? And honestly, I do actually feel for Lauren Hugh here, because even though she called me a self-important asshole, which, I mean, hey, look, I will admit that the universe does revolve around me, so, that label is pretty accurate, so, I'll wear it like a badge of honor. A is for awesome. Nonetheless, sending her death threats, and harassing her is not cool. It's one thing to critique and call out, especially if someone continues going and you're like, no, like you're literally lying. That's one thing. It's another thing to actually harass a person. And for the record, those two things are two completely separate things, contrary to what some people on the internet want you to believe, such as Miss Lauren Hugh and how she's trying to spin things. So this part of the video is actually more directed at book Twitter, more so than Lauren Hugh. But it is in line with what we're discussing, so I was like, hey, why not throw this in? So book Twitter, or I guess really Twitter in general, is a pretty good app for holding people accountable. That being said, the app is also really useful if you want to spread misinformation. And depending on the size of your following, you can manipulate a situation based on whatever your misinformation is to then change the narrative. And unless someone with a bigger following calls you out for it and says, no, you're lying, this is what happened, or no, that's not what I said, why are you taking my shit out of context woefully, that's usually the narrative that sticks around, unless someone with a bigger following says something. And because of that, that person who spread the misinformation in the first place can then basically encourage other people who follow them, especially if they do have a larger platform, to then go around harassing other people and fighting their battles for them, while they get to kind of just wash their hands clean of it and pretend that they are divorced from it. If you want an example of that, I can think of a very specific discourse from last year. With that being said, the point of this is, there's this idea going around book Twitter that book Twitter can affect sales of a book negatively. Now, I 100% believe that book Twitter has more than enough power to actually uplift and affect the sales of a book positively, because it has. I definitely think that, for example, These Violent Delights and Cemetery Booze benefited greatly from the presence of social media. I do think that those books probably still would have hit the list, but I think because of how widespread those books were on social media, that helped heavily contribute to the successes of those books. Book Twitter and arguably Book Talk are some of the biggest book movers on social media. More so Book Talk because it can take a book that is obscure and suddenly put it on the list, or at least make it popular enough to where stores start carrying it. And Book Talk can also take something that used to be on the list like years ago, and the list being New York Times, obviously. And this book could have been off the New York Times for like the last 5 years, and then all of a sudden just skyrocket up because Book Talk decided to start spreading it around, and people were like, hey, I want to read that. But if book Twitter isn't actually interested in a book, can they actually affect sales? And the short answer is no. I've seen a lot of reviews going around of Miss Lauren Hugh's book being like, oh, I'm never gonna pick this up, or congrats on ruining your career, you just lost a sale. And guys, book Twitter was never the intended audience for this book. It's really important to me that y'all know this. Now, I know, book Twitter isn't only YA and fantasy and romance, but that is an overwhelmingly huge amount of book Twitter. Even with majority of book Twitter vowing to never purchase or read this book, it's not really gonna do anything. Miss Lauren Hugh's book is a book of essays about a white but queer woman, and thus that's directed at a completely different market. Even if you tell the people in the market about what's currently going on to try and deter sales, you're gonna get like 3 different responses. Either it won't work. They agree with Lauren, or they won't understand a damn thing you just said, because honestly, explaining book Twitter shit to people is like speaking in another language. If they are not on Twitter, trust me, these people won't understand what you just said to them. In the case of other authors such as Jay Kristoff and Emily A. Duncan, I'm pretty sure they're going to be mostly unaffected as well. Jay Kristoff has carved out a very large following of straight and white men that I can guarantee you some of these people will just spite buy a book to just stick it to book Twitter. And if you don't believe me, look at some of the conversations people have had with straight and white men regarding, say, Brandon Sanderson or Andy Weir. I guarantee you that if it has not already made the rounds, once it has made the rounds that book Twitter has canceled Jay Kristoff, they are going to be suddenly super interested in seeing what this book is like. And Emily A. Duncan's book, from what I remember, hit the New York Times bestseller list. Not only that, but it is basically just a Raylo and Dark Lena fan fiction. And because of that, it has already made a place in the heart of people in those fandoms, especially since Emily A. Duncan was huge in those fandoms for what they themselves had to say. And while obviously not all Raylos and Dark Lenas have this issue, many of us can attest to the fact that a lot of them can be pretty problematic and very racist. In all the years that book Twitter has been around, the only time that I've actually seen an author have to face the consequences of something that they've done because book Twitter decided to go ahead and make them the villain of the day was a black author, and it was for something so... It honestly appalled me at what I saw, and the fact that it was for a marginalized author, especially a black author, does not escape me. And no, I will not be discussing what that one was, because frankly, I don't want to revive that old drama for them. Now that they'll probably even see this video, honestly, because I really doubt that they were gonna watch this. So unless you're like a budding author who relies on book Twitter or needs book Twitter to kind of carve out a career for them, book Twitter can't really cancel books, and they can't really affect sales. Because book Twitter, again, can uplift, but your average person who buys a book will maybe watch a booktube video, or see a book video on Book Talk, and maybe see a tweet on book Twitter. But your average reader is not actually part of book Twitter. Book Twitter, Book Talk, and booktube are such a small portion of the community of readers. And while Book Talk moves books a lot faster than anyone else, it's still a very small portion. Now, as Lauren Hugh has continued to double down and really continue to tweet, and trust me when I say that she is tweeting, a common thing she has claimed is that all of this, everything that has happened to her on Twitter, everything that she started, and what people are doing with her book and how people are talking to her, is because she's a woman. Now, is book Twitter sexist? I mean, I've certainly seen instances of sexism on book Twitter, but a lot of book Twitter consists of non-cis men on the platform. Non-cis men who are all about cis men are scum, and protect women, and protect trans people, and protect non-binary people. So, like, probably not. I don't think book Twitter as a whole is sexist. Now, are there individuals on the platform who are sexist? Yes, I can attest to this, because I have interacted with some of them before in the past. They are not fun people, but they will never have their platform taken away from them. But people like Lauren Hugh, who has not one but two marginalizations that she's able to use. Ooh. Oppression Olympics. They always tend to fall back on at least one or both of them, especially when they get called out for doing something. It does not matter if they get called out for just saying something really dumb, or if they get called out for saying something racist. Yes, I may be white, but I am still a woman, and I am queer. That is why people are attacking me.
Why are you making me do this?
I wish I was kidding, but that's been her actual defense a lot of times, contrary to what she's backpedaled toward.
Of course, but bringing stuff that isn't the case is not helping anyone. We're not targeting you because you're a woman or a lesbian. We were really upset by something you said and everything that went after. At some point, this is just gonna have to end.
You're targeting a woman because she said ratings are dumb and arbitrary and used bad words. You don't do this to men. Ever. Y'all want to be fucking vigilantes. There are actually shitty books you could review bomb, but Hillbilly Elegy was written by a straight white dude, so I guess I'm the next worst person? You shouldn't have worn that skirt. You shouldn't have been so loud. You should have smiled.
Yeah, let's not compare your book getting bad reviews to women being assaulted. You went out of your way to be nasty to a reviewer who gave your book a 4.5-star review. I don't agree with people giving your book bad reviews, but your analogy isn't anywhere close to being relevant.
I'll decide what's relevant. Victim-blaming language is rape culture, and it's fucking relevant when the only writers this ever happens to are women.
You shouldn't have called them assholes in the first place. You had it coming, hun. Cry me a river.
You had it coming. I think they like queers until we get too loud or queer or show any signs but quiet gratitude they let us be in the room. I'm going with yes. You're literally no better than the toxic mobs of mouth-breathing Trumpster men who gang up on women online. You're fucking Gamergate 2.0 masquerading as feminists.
But why is she mad that we're matching her energy? Like, she's allowed to call us names, but we're not allowed to respond?
Respond all you want, honey. Don't fucking trash my goddamn life because I dented your fragile ego. They have to live with being insignificant. It's triggering as fuck. I mean, for fuck's sake, I just put out a book about being silenced. Fucking tortured for not smiling enough. Not being grateful for the torture. I really fucking hoped that being a writer meant I could speak. Finally. And here we are again.
The last sentence really irks me. It's one of those sentences that spins things around. It makes you the victim even though you called them assholes. It's more a case of you called them assholes and they defended themselves.
What is a rational defense for being called an asshole? Are we cool burning someone's house down? Killing their dog? Too far? What about destroying their life's work? Yeah, that seems reasonable. Good talk. Go back to YouTube. I hear burning books is real popular over there with the Nazis.
Wait, so if she blocked me, how did she find something I didn't hashtag or tag her in? Kind of unfair I can't actually block her.
Oh, I agree. We should definitely talk about why writers would side with fucking book burners. It's gonna be funny as shit when these assholes have to read my book in school.
Witnessing a verified author with 60K followers tank her new book release by publicly going after people who rated her book 4 stars is painful to watch. Authors, some advice. Reader reviews are not for you. They are for readers. Also, this is a book published by a big publisher. I can't help but feel bad for the dozens of people who worked on it in some form, only to have the author turn around and do this. Editors, publicists, marketing, design, everyone has a hand in it. It would be a slap in the face.
Here's some advice. Don't attack a fellow author. Motherfucker sees a woman being swarmed on and decides to pile on. Good instincts there. Super good guy. You should be very proud.
Oh, good grief.
Look, anyone who has glanced at book Twitter or has knowledge of book Twitter knows that people on book Twitter have a habit of calling out problematic people on the platform. Trust me when I say that this isn't happening to you because you're a queer or a woman or a queer woman. I mean, I will say, hey, maybe this is happening to you because you're white, because, I mean, for me, I am reverse racist. So, but Miss Lauren Hugh has not talked about her being attacked for being white. So I can't give her any credit for that. So unfortunately, that's going to have to be a 0 right there. No extra credit. The thing is, if you're going to make a dumb tweet and then stand by it, yeah, people are going to call you out. Especially if you continue to admit that you did anything wrong, when you clearly did. Lauren also talked about not feeding the trolls, which is ironic to me because all she's done this entire time is just replying to people or quote tweeting. And at this point, I mean, she is really the one who's just trolling with people because she's just the one being willfully obtuse and refusing to see any other point of view because she's been silenced in the past, and that must mean now she can say whatever she wants because she's been silenced. You do realize that no matter what hardships you face, no matter how many, you can still say the wrong shit, right? Like, I am a queer, Latino, indigenous, and unfortunately part colonizer man. I have a lot of marginalizations. That does not mean that I am free to just speak my mind and receive no consequences or backlash. Unless you are white and you want to comment on something I said, in which case, I can't believe that you just called me the B slur. I don't really think we need to do a tweet-by-tweet breakdown of any of these tweets. I think they kind of all just speak for themselves. And trust me when I say that this is really only scratching the surface. But I guess to sum it up, of course someone who's friends with Charlotte Clymer, a white activist who has been regularly called out for racist and bigoted remarks, would act like this. White women weaponize their very few marginalizations that they have the same way that white men and men tend to oppress people. And I'm not saying that Miss Lauren Hugh is oppressing anyone, especially not with these dumb tweets. I'm just saying that this is the exact same behavior. And if multiple upon multiple people of color and activists are saying the same thing about you, it's probably true. I will say, a part of me does actually feel for Lauren Hugh, her behavior and her friends aside, because her debut day should have just been a day to celebrate the book that talked about how she escaped a cult and how she, as a queer woman, has been able to thrive and succeed in life. Even though she is still white, she is still queer, and she is still a woman, and just being able to talk about that. Instead of just deciding to say, hey, I made a bad tweet, she's continued to go on this tirade. It's to the point to where even authors who don't regularly talk on book Twitter are pitching in. Like, TJ Klune had a fucking tweet. TJ Klune had a tweet. Like, that just baffles me. Like, why is TJ Klune talking about this? Will it end? Probably not. Like, I'm not gonna lie to y'all. She's kind of already gone on her Lanny Sara marketing strategy of talking about how her book is the lowest rated book on Goodreads, which is not true. One of my short stories under a pen name is clearly the lowest rated book on Goodreads. The more we talk about this, the more attention she gets, the more she gets to tweet, the more attention her book gets. I will say that the people who are like, I'm buying your book because of this controversy, and stick it to the haters and the Nazis and the book burners, those were probably always the target audience, because I've looked at some of these people's Twitters and they scream white liberal. Not all of them are white, not all of them are liberal, but for the most part it's white liberals, and that is probably who Miss Lauren Hugh's book was directed at. White liberals. I mean, this book was gonna sell regardless because everyone knows nothing sells a book more than trauma involving a marginalized identity. Will Lauren Hugh's career be affected by all of this going on? I mean, she says that this has only driven up her following. Honestly, I think it's just the fact that she wrote a book about her experiences as a queer and white woman, and also the fact that Roxane Gay talked about her book. Like, she literally blurbed Lauren Hugh's book. That alone probably drove up your following. Like, do you know who Roxane Gay is? Like, I mean, I know she blurbed your book, but like, you gotta understand, that's probably where majority of these people are coming from, right? Honestly, there's not much more to say on this subject. Lauren Hugh made a dumb tweet, it started a discourse, and now we're here. So, you might be wondering, what was the point of all this? Honestly, I think it's just a really good case study on how white women be white womening, especially on the internet. If you decide to read Lauren's book, I'm not gonna say that you should or shouldn't. I'm someone who personally believes that we can read whatever we want. But if you are going to read her book and you're a reviewer or someone with a social media presence, probably don't post your star rating and don't talk about the book negatively. Because I know some people don't do well with negative interaction on the timeline. And knowing Miss Hugh, she'll probably just use it to prop up this discourse again once everything has started to die down again. Though, honestly, I will say, if you want to pick up a book about queer experiences, pick up a person of color. Like, pick up a queer person of color's book. Because honestly, at the end of the day, do we really need to give the white gays more publicity?